Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to set up for your labs this week. I say labs, but you will be completing one part of a three-part lab depending on what group you are in. So this video will cover the instructions for all three of the labs. So you just need to pay attention to the instructions for the lab you are responsible for. The first one we're going to look at is pressure versus volume. Now, when you are doing a lab, you need to keep everything constant. So I'm going to reset this to the way you'll see it when you get started. If we are looking at the relationship between pressure and volume, then we need to leave temperature and the number of particles constant. So that's what we are going to be changing is, or that's what we're looking at the relationship is pressure, temperature, volume, and number of particles. So to begin for the first lab, pressure and volume, you are going to pump some number of particles in here, okay, get some particles in the space. And at this point, we're not going to add or take away any of those particles. We're just going to let those bounce around. And you can see that as they bounce around the edges of their containers, they are exerting pressure on the container. So what we're able to do is actually keep certain variables constant. And for pressure and volume, we need to make sure that temperature is held constant. So I'm going to check that. That means we can no longer add heat over here. And of course, we're leaving the number of particles constant. So we also want to make sure that the width is shown, that we can see that. Unfortunately, this doesn't give us a number for the volume, but that's okay because we know volume is related to the width. Volume is length times width times height. So if the height of the container and the length of this container is staying constant and all we're changing is the width, then we're changing the volume effectively. Remember, volume is the amount of space something takes up. So you can take this little handle here and you can move it out and you can move it in and look at how the pressure is changing. So when it's very tight, it seems that we have a higher pressure. Now, you can use whatever units you want. You can use atmospheres. Well, not whatever units. It looks like the only options are atmospheres and kilopascals. I would recommend using atmospheres, but it's not going to matter for your graph. But what you're going to be doing for this lab is adjusting the volume. And again, remember, volume is measured in cubic centimeters. But we are going to have to use this nanometers to be related to our volume. So we would say the volume is based on a width of 5 nanometers. And we would record this pressure. Now notice I didn't change anything with my temperature. And then I would change it to a new volume. And I would record the new volume and the new pressure. And I'm just going to do that until I have about 5 different volumes, and then you will be graphing your data. You can probably already have a good idea of what's going on, whether the pressure increases or decreases based on the size of the container. So that's the first lab. The next lab we're going to do is pressure versus temperature. So if we're going to do pressure versus temperature, I'm going to go ahead and reset it. We want to keep the number of particles the same. So I'm going to pump some particles in here to use. And we want to keep the volume the same. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that is held constant. And so now we can't move the volume. Everything is going to depend on the pressure, or sorry, on the temperature. So what we're going to do is we are going to be changing the temperature. So you can change the temperature by cooling it and recording the pressure. And here's the temperature. This is temperature in Kelvin. We'll talk about that Kelvin scale probably after this lab, but Kelvin is another way to measure temperature. And notice here we have the degrees in Celsius. So that's very cold, -67 degrees Celsius, way below freezing. But what you will do is you will record both temperatures and the pressure. So you guys will actually be Actually, we'll do one group will be pressure and temperature Celsius, and another group will be pressure and temperature Kelvin. Okay. So if you were in the pressure and temperature Celsius, you're going to have one graph. And then if you're pressure and temperature Kelvin, you will have another graph to do. So right now you can just use Celsius and record the pressure. And I know these numbers are changing, and that's okay. Let it settle. I would say, this is teetering around around 11, but I would say that's maybe like 10.9. You're just going to have to pick a number. And then you can give it more heat by increasing the fire there. So notice you can record, and you can just continue doing that until it's a new temperature and a new pressure. But you're going to fill out your table with 5 different temperatures and recording the pressure. Now, our independent variable here is temperature, because that is what I'm changing. What you measure at the end, that is your dependent variable. So pressure depends on the temperature. And you can already see that relationship. As you increase the temperature, you can see what's happening to our pressure. All right. So the last lab is going to be pressure and number of particles. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this and get these instructions. Volume constant, and we need to hold the temperature constant as well. So let's see how we can do this. Okay, so as soon as we get some particles out here, we should be able to hold, let's see. I need to stop recording for a minute. Well, it might not let me, so let's just see what we can do here. Okay, so we can't click temperature here and volume, but what we can do is just not touch this. So we will make sure we do not change the temperature. We'll just keep it constant here. But you can kind of see what I just did. We're trying, again, we're holding volume constant. We'll hold temperature constant. We're going to add some particles. It looks like you can just add particles with this double arrow here. So I added 50 particles. That tells you the number of particles. So there's 50 particles, and there's our pressure. Then we can add another 50. So our particles are 100 now, and our pressure is that. And you can just do that until you have about 250 particles, or you can always do it a different way, and you can just pump a certain number of particles in there. And so we have 69 particles at that pressure, and then let's add some more particles. Okay, now we have that many particles and that pressure. So you are looking at how the number of particles is related to the pressure, and you'll be graphing that. So sorry for that awkward pause there while I figured some stuff out. But these are your instructions for the 3 parts of your lab. So I'll try to time these to where you can watch your specific instructions for your lab. Let me know if you have any questions.